All right, everyone, welcome back. Today we're just going to be looking at some model paragraphs for your first assignment. I'm sure you're all curious, as to what depth this rhetorical analysis for assignment one should have. And so I'd like to show you some of the moves that I'll be looking for when I grade this. There's probably more surface level rhetorical analyses and deeper ones. And I'm going to suggest that we head for some deeper ones, but I want to show you some ways to do that. So that you're happy with the results, and I am as well, I suppose, right? What it's going to do, though, is force you farther into language, give you some new tools for your writing, not just in rhetorical analysis, which you won't necessarily write a lot after college, even though you'll do it in order to write something else. You have to be able to analyze language and see what those before you have done with language. That's just part of working in the professional workplace and using last year's report to write this year's report and altering it as necessary, right? So these language skills are important, the ability to analyze language. You'll also get, though, a fair amount of critical thinking out of this. There's some basic moves that you can apply to any paper or just to your thought process without writing. And so we'll work on those in just a minute, but that is the gist of this video as we prepare for this first assignment. So for the first thing to do is probably just remind you that this exists. Right here is, that's not it, of course. This is it right here. This is the description of your first assignment. A previous video went over this in great detail. This can be found here. Here's our D2L homepage. Go all the way to the bottom. Sometimes if there's enough posts, you'll have to hit look at all posts from the semester or something like this to get all the way back to the beginning. Show all announcements, I guess it is. Make sure you click on that. And speed of internet willing, we'll find everything we need back here. Here is your online assignment description. So open this and you will get eventually this to open. And it has everything you need, and that previous video outlines it as well. So know that that is there. That should take care of what you need to do. In addition, though, today's analysis, I think, will be the most helpful. It's worth saying this maybe now in case I run out of room at the end of the video. After today, we'll shift from a discussion of rhetorical analysis, discourse, communities, public sphere issues, other course concepts. We're going to shift away from these things for a couple of days to just focus on academic writing skills. And you see a list here: writing an effective introduction, developing a paragraph will give you a few strategies, writing connected topic sentences, some fairly specific things I'll be looking for that will help you be successful, not in this course, but after this course as well. So you can think again of this as style, but more of an academic style rather than the more public styles, the various styles we've been exploring and reading so far in this course, which are a bit more literary sometimes. All right, so without further ado, here's some basic things that you can do in this paper, and you'll see eventually this is where we're going to wind up. I wrote the body of basically half of a paper. I took 1 point of rhetorical analysis. I chose irony in the use of Joy Williams' Save the Whales, Screw the Shrimp. You're using the Sierra Club Grand Canyon documents. I used a different thing that we've read for class, Save the Whales, Screw the Shrimp, which you also practiced on. And so we'll go over that in a minute, and I will post this document online. You can see me iterating where I'm doing all the things that I want you to do, of course, as we work through basically half of a paper. All right. So what are those things, though? This is probably the important stuff to remember as you begin thinking and doing the early stages of writing in your paper. Remember, for our class, I'm going to call 3 instances of something a pattern. So that is, you need 3 examples from the Grand Canyon documents. Probably 1 to 2 documents will be all you need to get this work done. 3 instances, 3 examples, think of it how you will, of personification or ethos or pathos or dystopian rhetoric. Whatever it is, you remember you have that long list of various rhetorical devices. From the Silent Spring video, you saw that sometimes there's plenty of rhetorical devices that can't be listed. They're just there and you see them. And we saw Rachel Carson was very good at using these. One of my favorites was sort of metaphorical language related to speed, that we're moving too quick and that we're out of control. And she chose a lot of language in one paragraph that made it seem like that. Humanity and science is moving too quick. And so you could actually invent your own rhetorical strategy. It's there. You see somebody using it in the Grand Canyon documents, let's say. it's used 3 or 4 times, great. Go ahead, give that a definition, explain how it works, and you've kind of invented your own rhetorical device, right? Or at least you saw it, you perceived it. And that would be okay too. If you're not comfortable with that, you can always use the list that I gave you, and there's plenty of examples of that. I've done this assignment many times, as students always have an easy time finding what they need. But remember, 3 instances is a pattern, and you'll see even down in the body here, I gave sort of a brief thesis. Your introduction will look larger, and the assignment sheet outlines what to say. And then I had 3 paragraphs, 1 for each example. Example 1, example 2, and example 3. All right, and so that's just for irony. That would be 1 rhetorical device. You're asked to analyze at least 2 to make sure you have enough for the paper. All right, so what are the things you want to do? Here is, in this paragraph here, a list of all the moves that you'll probably want to make inside of each paragraph. Again, to push your critical thinking, to push your analysis, to help you develop a paragraph and say a lot more about this rather than say too little about it. You'll likely need in each paragraph the following: a definition. You'll see a definition probably in the topic sentence or maybe just in the introduction, but you could definitely provide a definition of ethos or logos or dystopian rhetoric. It can be kind of one that you put together, but you might want to borrow one from somebody that we've read so far. I'll give you a few suggestions in a minute. In fact, I'll even say this now. This document, it is entitled Sample Poster Analysis. Is just something I use with my freshmen. It has a very, very short example of rhetorical analysis. Too short, really, for what we're doing, even though you could pick up some moves here. But what it does have that I'd like you to borrow, and you don't have to cite this in your paper, has a really nice breakdown of ethos, pathos, logos, should you choose those. Don't just say that ethos appeals to the emotions. You could say ethos ethos appeals to, say, trustworthiness or something like that. You can say intelligence, virtue, morals, perception. In the same way, pathos, which appeals to the emotions, can appeal to emotions and feelings, biases, right, the things we're inclined to believe. Or like our senses in some way, overriding our intellect, we might say, or our intelligence, and our motivations to do something. So pathos can be all of those. You don't just call it emotion, any of these things, and including any of these 4 in your definition will help you see them inside of the text that you're analyzing. And so it just gives you a more articulate way, a more subtle way of discussing the use of pathos, because a pathos is emotion, but it's these things too. So this is there to support you if you need it. It's a very brief example of rhetorical analysis, although the one I'm about to show you here on Save the Whale, Screw the Shrimp will suit your needs much better for this paper. All right, so a good definition to open things up. You can see that I'm doing that here. I've outlined it here. Definition. Uses irony, which is saying one thing and meaning the opposite. And that's enough of a definition to make this paper go. All right. So a definition, a sample passage should follow soon after. You will need a quote from, in your case, the Sierra Club documents. You'll need a connection back to the thesis. And again, if I don't have time to say all this in the video, you will see that everything that I'm outlining for you here is what I am highlighting and commenting on over here. So you can see where these things do appear in each paragraph. So that I'm looking for certain qualities, certain types of information. A definition, at least once in the beginning of each rhetorical move. A sample passage, a connection back to the thesis, always important for each paragraph. An explanation of how the rhetoric works. Don't just say, yes, emotion is there, or yes, dystopian rhetoric exists. Explain how that sample, that quote you've taken from Sierra Club, is dystopian. How does it make the world seem like it's failing? How does it seem like our patterns of consumption, or our patterns of overpopulation, or our patterns of using up our resources too quickly are again out of control and will lead to a worse future? You could tie it into fear, into some type of scare tactic. You could also tie it in, we know from our reading, into countering a scientific narrative that science can fix our problems. So a good definition of apocalyptic rhetoric could be any or all of those things, right? And you would want to say that in your definition statement, and then you would want to give us a passage and explain how that passage is doing that. How is it using fear? How is it countering scientific thinking? Et cetera, right? And so you'll see again examples of that in the paragraphs. And if we don't get a chance to do everything, you can look at it online and see what I'm doing. At some point, you will need a statement demonstrating how all three examples do capture the author Williams' own values. We'll look at all this in a minute. I just want to quickly say, what in this will transfer elsewhere outside of this assignment or to other courses or the writing in the rest of your life? Using a good definition to enhance your analysis. We'll see that in a second. Providing what I call the what plus the why and the how. You can always give a what. So-and-so is good, right? This idea is good for society. But you always want to explain why and how it's good, why and how it's better than competing ideas, why and how it might be different than other people that agree with you that it's good, but you've got different values, right? Why and how it might solve the world's problems differently than we imagined. There are many different ways we can use why and how, but why and how are the good explanatory questions that force you to explain your values and to explain how the world's problems will be solved. They really help you with your recommendation. So one pattern I teach is what plus why and how. It's a great thing to do to develop a paragraph when you don't know what to say next. So remember that. That's a huge takeaway. You can contrast with similar points. That's something I'm also doing in each paragraph. You'll see that as I go, if we move down to the second paragraph here, you can see I've got it outlined here, that right here, comment 6. I'm contrasting this use, my second example of irony, with the previous. Okay. And so if we just take a look, you haven't read this yet, but you will eventually. How people's own commercial thinking ironically turns animals into products, right? And so that's a little different than my first example, which you'll get to read and you'll see the differences, right? You'll see me doing all of that work. All right, so contrasting with similar points always gives you more to say, refines your analysis. You're not just saying, here's another example, here's another example, here's another example, but rather pointing out how they're the same, but also how they're different. Compare, contrast, one of our basic modes of thinking in life, right? So you might as well use that to your advantage and use it as a tool for writing and critical thinking. D here, explaining unique connections of all the ideas to the thesis. I did underline the thesis here. Here's one I worked off of. Again, this is for Joy Williams. And this is one of the big things we could say her essay is about. Save the whale, screw the shrimp. That we oftentimes have, see, I guess I'll read the whole thing. Williams uses irony, which is what I chose, to persuade the reader that government organizations that are meant to protect nature and ecology and ecological balance often dominate nature and the ecology for reasons based in human commercial values rather than the ecological values they're supposed to protect, right? And so that is one way of reading the essay. And so this is what I chose for my thesis. It's one point we could make. But then here's the thing. I want to bring each of my paragraphs back to this and show how each example of irony that I'm outlining does come back to this at some point. And so you will see, again, I don't have time to read through everything. I'm running low on time here. But you will see all of those things happening down here, and I'm explaining them as I go, so I'll let you see these. So your pink comments here showing you that at some point in the paragraph, not in a patterned way, but at some point in each paragraph, I am doing all of these things, and I will be looking for you to do these things as well. This is what to say, or the various ways to analyze things. So if I'm being a bit redundant here in this video, I'm sorry, but I really want you to do well in this paper and to make sure that you know that these are my values for grading and that they're really strong takeaways that you can use in other papers as well. All right. I'll just maybe briefly show an example of an underdeveloped rhetorical analysis, at least for our purposes. Here's something I again give my 100 level classes. And it's got the same basic advice I gave you. Set up your definition early. Have a strong definition. That is clearly not a good one. This is a better one. Explain how something persuades, right? And you can see this is one example from some freshmen a while back. And you can see how I took what they did and I used some of the definition of, I guess I don't have it, from the Rosie the Riveter, and grabbed motivation and bias and senses and those things that pathos can be, and wove them in here to really say a lot more than is said here. However, I would still like you to move beyond this. Notice this is basically kind of like a list of things that moves quick. What we're looking for at our level is a fully developed paragraph off of just one single example of irony in this case. Could be personification or pathos for you or whatever it is. We see here one more example. It looks like a list. First, second, third, all of these would become individual paragraphs, inside of what I'm asking you to do. So we don't have time to go through all of this, but please do read through this. You will see all of these moves I'm looking for outlined and appearing in each paragraph here. Thank you.